Welcome to Drift to Sleep. Hello, my friend. Thank you for joining me tonight. Welcome back to Drift to Sleep. If you enjoy cozy bedtime stories and gentle fairy tales, you can always support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. But for now, simply get comfortable. The story you're about to hear is called The Harvest Banquet at Amber Barn. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out, and let's begin. At the far edge of the valley of marigold fields, beyond the village bakery, beyond the old stone bridge, and beyond the lane where apple trees leaned over the road, there stood a barn the color of late afternoon sunlight. Everyone called it Amber Barn. It had been there for as long as anyone in the valley could remember. Its wide wooden doors faced the western hills. Its roof was weathered by rain, wind, summer heat, and many peaceful winters. Its boards had once been plain brown, but years of sun had warmed them into shades of honey, gold, and deep amber. In the evening, when the sun lowered behind the fields, the whole barn seemed to glow, not brightly, not like a lantern, more like a memory, soft and warm, as though it held all the autumns it had ever seen. Long ago, Amber Barn had belonged to the Bellwether family. They grew apples, pumpkins, squash, herbs, and late-season pears. Every October, after the last harvest wagon had returned from the fields, the Bellwethers held a supper in the barn. People brought soup in covered pots, loaves of bread wrapped in linen, jars of jam, cheese, baskets of apples, pumpkin pies, and mugs of cider sweetened with cinnamon. There was music sometimes, soft fiddles, gentle singing, a little dancing when everyone had eaten enough to feel cheerful, but mostly people came for the feeling of it. The long tables, the golden lanterns, the scent of hay and baked apples, the sound of rain on the roof if the evening turned wet, the comfort of neighbors sitting close together while the year slowly folded itself toward winter. Then, over time, things changed. Families moved, children grew up, some went to the city, some traveled farther than they ever expected. The Bellwether farm was sold. The barn stood quiet for many years, not forgotten, never forgotten, but unused. The orchard paths grew mossy. The old supper tables were stacked in a corner. The lantern hooks gathered dust. And each autumn, when the sun turned the barn golden, the villagers would glance toward it and say, "Do you remember the harvest banquets?" They did. Everyone did, but memory is not quite the same as gathering. One crisp October afternoon, 6 old friends received invitations. Each invitation arrived in a different way. Mara found hers tucked inside a basket of apples at the market. Tobin discovered his between 2 folded tablecloths in the back of his tea shop. Sierra found hers beneath the windshield wiper of her little blue car after visiting the bakery. Jonah, who repaired clocks, found his inside an old pocket watch that had not opened in years. Pippa found hers slipped beneath the door of her pottery studio, and Eliza Bellwether found hers on the kitchen table of her farmhouse, beside a jar of cinnamon sticks and a candle that had not been lit. Each invitation was written on thick cream paper. The edges were touched with gold. At the top was a tiny drawing of Amber Barn with its doors open and lanterns glowing inside. The message was the same for each of them. You are invited to the harvest banquet at Amber Barn. Come at sunset. Bring only a warm memory. There was no signature, only a pressed apple leaf tied to the corner with golden thread. For most of the friends, the invitation felt mysterious. For Eliza, it felt like a whisper from the past. She had inherited the farm 2 years earlier, after her aunt passed away. The house, the orchard, the fields, and Amber Barn had all come into her care. She had been slowly restoring the place ever since. A repaired fence here, a freshly painted gate there, new hinges on the barn doors, clean straw in the loft, lanterns polished one by one during quiet evenings. Eliza had often thought about reviving the Harvest Banquet, but the thought always felt too large, too important, too full of history. What if no one came? What if people came and felt disappointed? What if the barn did not feel the way it used to? So she had waited and waited and waited, but now the invitation had appeared on her table, and when Eliza picked it up, the little apple leaf shimmered faintly in the afternoon light. She looked out toward Amber Barn. Its wide doors were closed. Its roof shone softly under the autumn sky. A breeze moved through the orchard, and the branches stirred like a group of old friends waking from a nap. Eliza smiled. Perhaps the barn had waited long enough. All afternoon, Eliza prepared. She did not know who had sent the invitations or how many people might arrive, but she knew how to make a barn feel welcoming. She opened the wide doors first. They creaked gently, then swung outward into the golden air. Dust motes floated through the sunbeams. Inside, Amber Barn smelled of dry hay, old wood, apple crates, and the clean sweetness of autumn air. Eliza stood in the doorway for a moment and listened. The barn was quiet, but not empty. Some places hold silence the way a cup holds tea, warmly, expectantly. She rolled up her sleeves and began. First, she swept the floor. Long strokes with a straw broom, dust and leaves drifted toward the door. A few old feathers, a twist of twine, one dried apple stem. Then she wiped down the long wooden tables that had been stacked against the wall. She dragged them into the center of the barn one by one. They were heavy, but she moved slowly and carefully. No hurry. There was something comforting about the work. The scrape of table legs over the floor, the scent of lemon oil as she polished the wood, the way the tables seemed to regain their purpose as they stood side by side. She spread linen runners down the center, cream-colored with tiny embroidered wheat sheaves at the corners. She set out mismatched plates, some white, some blue, some painted with little flowers. Then came bowls, cups, forks, spoons, and folded napkins tied with twine. By late afternoon, the table looked ready for a gathering. Not perfect, better than perfect, comfortable, lived in, kind. Next, Eliza brought out the lanterns. There were dozens of them, some made from brass, some from glass, some from old jam jars wrapped with wire, some shaped like little barns, some shaped like apples. She hung them from beams, hooks, and doorways. She placed smaller candles along the tables. She set 2 large lanterns outside the open doors to guide guests in from the lane. The sun lowered. The light in the barn changed from gold to amber, then to honey. Eliza went to the farmhouse kitchen and checked the food. She had made a large pot of butternut squash soup with sage, a tray of roasted root vegetables, warm bread rolls brushed with butter, apple and onion stuffing, cranberry pear compote, a pumpkin custard tart, and a pot of cider simmering with cinnamon, cloves, and orange peel. She did not know if it would be enough, but something told her it would be. As the cider warmed, its fragrance drifted through the farmhouse. Eliza filled a small basket with cinnamon sticks, extra napkins, matches, and one smooth river stone she always kept near the stove for luck. Then she paused by the window. The sun was nearly touching the hills. Beyond the orchard, the lane to Amber Barn was beginning to glow. She saw one figure walking up the path, then another, then another. Eliza's heart softened. They had come. Mara arrived first, wrapped in a rust-colored shawl, carrying a pie wrapped in a towel. Mara had once been the boldest child in their group. She climbed trees higher than anyone else. Now she ran the village bookshop and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Tobin came next, holding a tin of tea biscuits and wearing his green coat with the patched elbows. Sierra followed with a basket of pears and rosemary. Jonah brought a small clock because he said every banquet needed to know when it had become late. Pippa carried a box of handmade clay cups glazed in soft blue and brown. And finally, there was Rowan Finch, who had travelled from the coast that morning and brought a jar of sea salt caramel for the apples. 6 friends stood together in front of Amber Barn. For a moment, no one spoke. They had known one another as children. They had run through these fields, hidden in this barn, climbed the apple trees, slept under quilts during harvest festivals. They had promised, at least once, that they would always meet here again. But life had carried them outward in gentle, ordinary ways. Work, families, journeys, seasons, years. Now here they were, older, quieter, still themselves. Mara looked at Eliza and smiled. "Did you send these invitations?" Eliza shook her head. "I thought one of you did." Tobin held up his envelope. "Mine appeared in my tea shop." "Mine was in a pocket watch," said Jonah. Pippa laughed softly. "Mine slid under my studio door all by itself, I think." They all looked toward the barn. The lanterns inside flickered, though Eliza had not lit them yet. Not all of them, only a few. But now, one by one, more lanterns glowed along the beams. Small flames blooming in glass, warm, golden, welcoming. No one seemed frightened. They simply watched. Then Rowan said, "Well, it would be rude not to go in," and together they stepped into Amber Barn. Before the banquet began, Eliza suggested they walk through the orchard. It had been part of the old tradition. Years ago, every harvest supper began with a slow walk among the apple trees, not to inspect the fruit, not to count the baskets, just to thank the orchard for another season. So the 6 friends left the food warming in the barn and followed the path behind it. The orchard spread over a gentle slope. Most of the apples had already been picked, but a few remained high in the branches, shining red and gold in the fading light. The grass beneath the trees was scattered with leaves, some curled dry and brown, some still soft and yellow. A few late apples rested on the ground, giving off a sweet, cider-like scent. Lanterns hung from the lower branches. Eliza had not hung them there. She was sure of that. Yet they glowed softly between the trees, making a golden path through the orchard. Each lantern held a tiny tag tied with string. The first tag had Mara's name written on it. She paused beneath the tree and untied it. On the tag was a memory, not written in ink exactly, more like letters made of warm light. Mara, age 9, reading ghost stories in the hayloft but changing the scary parts so everyone could sleep. Mara laughed. "I did do that. You made all the ghosts lonely rather than frightening," said Tobin, "and gave them biscuits," Jonah added. "They were better stories that way," Mara said. Everyone agreed. They continued along the path. The next tag belonged to Tobin. Tobin, age 10, spilling an entire pitcher of cider, and then inventing cinnamon floor tea. Tobin covered his face with one hand. "I had hoped that was forgotten." "Never," said Pippa. "It was legendary." The orchard seemed to enjoy their laughter. Leaves rustled overhead, though the wind had calmed. One by one, the friends found their tags. Sierra's memory was of weaving flower crowns from apple blossoms. Jonah's was of trying to fix a broken barn clock by taking it completely apart and hiding the pieces in a biscuit tin. Pippa's was of making clay bowls for a doll-sized harvest supper beneath the porch steps. Rowan's was of building a tiny bridge across a puddle so everyone could cross without muddy shoes. And Eliza's tag hung from the oldest apple tree, the one with a low branch shaped almost like a chair. She untied it carefully. The glowing words read, "Eliza, age 8, promising Amber Barn that she would never let the lights go out." Eliza grew very still. She had forgotten saying that. Or perhaps she had not forgotten exactly. Perhaps the memory had simply gone quiet beneath all the tasks of growing up. Mara touched her arm. "You did say that," she said softly, "during the last banquet before your family moved away for a while." Eliza looked toward the barn. Its open doors glowed at the bottom of the hill. "I suppose I tried," she said. "You did more than try," said Rowan. "You came back." They stood together beneath the oldest apple tree. Above them, lanterns glowed like low stars. The air smelled of apples, leaves, and wood smoke. Then something magical happened. The memory tags began to lift from their strings. One by one, they floated upward, glowing softly. Mara's tag, Tobin's, Sierra's, Jonah's, Pippa's, Rowan's, Eliza's. They rose into the branches of the apple trees, where they became small amber lights, not lanterns, not stars, something in between. The orchard brightened. Every tree held a few glowing memories, some new, some old, some belonging to people no longer there. The friends looked around in wonder. All across the orchard, tiny golden lights appeared, as if every harvest supper, every shared laugh, every apple picked, every child running through fallen leaves had left a little glow behind. Tobin removed his glasses and wiped them on his sleeve. "I think," he said, "the orchard remembers us." Eliza nodded. Her throat felt warm. "Maybe it remembers everyone." They walked slowly back toward the barn under a canopy of glowing memories. No one hurried. No one wanted to. When they returned to Amber Barn, the banquet table had changed. The food Eliza prepared was still there, but the table had somehow grown fuller. There were bowls of roasted squash with maple glaze, plates of buttered potatoes with herbs, a dish of baked apples stuffed with oats and raisins, small loaves of bread shaped like leaves, a pot of mushroom gravy, a wheel of cheese, and a covered dish that smelled wonderfully of rosemary. At the far end of the table stood 7 mugs, 6 for the friends, and 1 extra. Beside the extra mug was a small place card. It read, "For the keeper of Amber Barn." The friends looked at one another. Before anyone could speak, the hayloft ladder creaked. A little figure climbed down. He was no taller than a small child, but old in the way acorns are old. He wore a coat stitched from brown leaves, a scarf made of faded ribbon, and a hat shaped like a tiny overturned basket. His beard looked like dried corn silk. His boots were made from soft leather, carefully patched. He reached the floor, dusted straw from his sleeves, and bowed politely. "Good evening," he said. Everyone replied at once, though not in perfect order. The little man introduced himself as Bracken, the keeper of Amber Barn. He explained that every old gathering place has a keeper. Some are seen often, some rarely, some only when a promise needs remembering. Bracken had tended Amber Barn through the quiet years. He had kept mice from nibbling the napkins, encouraged swallows to nest in the safer rafters, polished lantern glass when no one was looking, and, most importantly, kept the memories warm. Places can grow cold when they are forgotten, Bracken said, but Amber Barn was never fully forgotten. That is why it still glows. Eliza looked around the barn. The lanterns flickered gently, the tables shone, the rafters seemed full of golden dusk. I wanted to bring the banquet back, she said, but I was not sure how. Bracken nodded. Beginning again often feels larger than continuing, so the barn sent invitations. The barn sent them? Asked Jonah. With some assistance, said Bracken modestly. Pippa smiled. And the extra food, the barn remembers recipes, said Bracken. Though I may have helped with the apple dishes, this seemed perfectly reasonable by then. They invited Bracken to sit in the 7th chair. He climbed up with some effort, accepted the extra mug, and looked pleased. Then the banquet began, not with a speech, not with ceremony, simply with passing dishes from hand to hand, soup ladled into bowls, bread broken open, butter melting, cider poured, cups lifted. The food tasted like autumn in every possible form, sweet, savory, earthy, warm. There were root vegetables roasted until their edges caramelized, apple stuffing with sage, pumpkin custard with nutmeg, pears poached in honey, biscuits tender enough to pull apart with 2 fingers, and the sea salt caramel Rowan brought, which everyone agreed belonged on apple slices, pear cakes, and possibly spoons. As they ate, the barn grew warmer. Outside, evening settled fully. The sky beyond the open doors turned deep blue. The first stars appeared over the fields. Inside, the lanterns glowed brighter, casting soft gold across the table. Mara told a story about the old hayloft. Jonah corrected one detail. Mara corrected his correction. Pippa nearly spilled cider from laughing. Sierra poured more tea. Tobin discovered that Bracken had strong opinions about biscuits. Eliza watched them all and felt something inside her loosen, not sadness, not exactly joy, something gentler, the relief of a long-held wish finally setting down its bag and staying a while. After supper, Bracken led them to the back of the barn. There, behind a stack of apple crates, was a door none of them remembered seeing. It was small and rounded at the top, made of the same amber wood as the barn walls. Bracken touched it with one finger. The door opened into a cozy room tucked inside the barn itself. A keeping room, he called it. The room was warm and low-ceilinged, with braided rugs on the floor and shelves filled with jars of dried herbs, old photographs, folded tablecloths, and little objects saved from past harvest banquets. A wooden horse with one missing wheel, a ribbon from a pie contest, a spoon carved with initials, a faded songbook, a clay cup made by a child, a bundle of letters tied with string. There was a small fireplace too, though Eliza could not imagine where its chimney went. A fire burned inside it anyway. Comfortable armchairs sat around the hearth. A kettle steamed on a hook. The friends entered quietly. It felt like stepping into the heart of the barn. Bracken poured them tea from the kettle. It tasted of apple peel, chamomile, and a little cinnamon. They sat near the fire with full stomachs and warm hands. No one felt the need to talk much. The evening had already said plenty. Through a tiny window, they could see the orchard lights glowing in the distance. The memory tags had become tiny lanterns among the branches. Some drifted slowly between trees, some rested near the ground like fireflies, some rose high above the orchard, joining the first stars. Eliza sat in an armchair near the hearth. The room was warm, the tea was fragrant, her friends were around her. Amber Barn was alive with light again. She thought of her childhood promise. She thought of all the years she had worried she would not know how to bring the old gatherings back. And now it seemed the answer had been gentle all along. Open the doors, light one lantern, set the table, invite someone in. That was how most warm things began. A little later, Bracken gave each friend a small amber bead. From the barn rafters, he said, not ordinary amber, memory amber. Each bead held a tiny glow. Mara's held the warmth of a lamp in the hayloft. Tobin's smelled faintly of spilled cider. Sarah's held the colour of apple blossoms. Jonah's gave a tiny tick like a quiet clock. Pippa's felt smooth as clay. Rowan's carried the scent of fresh-cut wood. Eliza's bead glowed with the same warmth as the barn doors at sunset. Keep them somewhere safe, Bracken said, not hidden away. Safe things still like to be seen. They promised they would. The fire in the little room burned low. The friends leaned back in their chairs. Outside, the barn lanterns shimmered. Beyond them, the orchard continued to glow. The whole valley seemed gathered into one soft circle of warmth. Eventually, the hour grew late. Not too late, just the right kind of late. The kind that arrives after good food, gentle laughter, and a long evening of candlelight. The friends helped clear the table, plates were stacked, cups gathered, leftover bread wrapped in cloth, lanterns checked. The barn did not feel empty as the banquet ended. It felt satisfied, full of voices, full of warmth, full of new memories settling into the rafters like birds finding their nests. Outside, the moon had risen over marigold fields. The grass shone silver. The orchard lights glowed softly between the trees. The lane home looked peaceful. At the barn doors, everyone paused. Mara hugged Eliza first, then Sarah, then Pippa. Tobin shook Bracken's tiny hand with great seriousness. Jonah promised to repair the old barn clock. Rowan offered to build new benches before next autumn. One by one, they walked down the lane, carrying leftovers, amber beads, and the quiet happiness of being together again. Eliza stood beside Bracken and watched their lanterns bob away into the night. Will they come back? Bracken asked. Eliza smiled. Yes. Next year? Before then, I think. The keeper nodded, pleased. Together, they returned to the barn. Most of the lanterns had burned low. The long table glowed softly in the remaining light. Eliza took one last look around, the restored doors, the polished lanterns, the memory-warm rafters, the empty chairs that no longer felt lonely. Then she whispered, "Thank you." Amber Barn creaked softly in reply, a warm, wooden sound, almost like a sigh. Eliza blew out the candles one by one. Not all the light disappeared. Some remained in the rafters, some in the orchard, some in the tiny amber bead she held in her hand, and some, she knew, would remain in her friends as they walked home beneath the moon. At last, she closed the wide barn doors. The latch settled into place, the orchard rustled, the fields rested. Amber Barn stood quiet once more, but not forgotten, never forgotten, only sleeping, waiting warmly for the next gathering. And now, our story has come to its quiet end. Amber Barn is resting beneath the autumn moon. The long table has been cleared. the lanterns are glowing low, and the harvest feast has become a warm memory tucked safely into the rafters. Eliza has gone back to the farmhouse. Her friends are walking home along moonlit lanes. Bracken, the keeper of the barn, is putting away the last cups and folding the linen runners with care. The orchard is still shining softly. Memory lights drift between the apple trees. Some are old, some are new, all of them are gentle. You do not need to prepare another table tonight. You do not need to light another lantern. You do not need to remember everything all at once. You can simply rest here. Let the barn doors close softly. Let the cider cool on the stove. Let the orchard lights grow dim and golden. Let your breathing become slow and peaceful. Thank you for listening to Drift to Sleep. I'm Adele Nguyen, and I'll be back soon with more cozy sleep stories and bedtime fairy tales. For now, keep your eyes closed. Let your body relax. Let the night hold you gently. Sleep well. Good night.